Your Excellency, Madam President, dear fellow faculty members, dear online viewers, and most importantly, dear students, on behalf of the European Humanities University community, I am pleased to welcome Her Excellency, the President Kersti Kaljulaid at our university. It is an honor to welcome President Kaljulaid today when Lithuania and Estonia commemorate the centenary of establishing diplomatic ties. Although Belarus and Estonia do not share a border, the ties between the two nations are strong. In the interwar period, Tallinn hosted a diplomatic mission of the Belarusian People's Republic. These days, Belarusians and Estonians are well regarded globally thanks to their IT talent. For us, at the Belarusian University-in-Exile, it is essential that technological advancement fosters civil society development, critical thinking, and democratic upbringing. The bonds between Estonia and EHU date back to the early years when our university was only getting settled in Vilnius, after we were expelled from the home country, Belarus. I want to thank the people of Estonia for the support provided to EHU in the first decade of our work, exceeding 120,000 euros. Last December, Estonia provided 50,000 euros more to support those Belarusian students who were oppressed by the Belarusian regime. Today, some of them are already here with us. I want to use this opportunity and to condemn the violence against peaceful protests in Belarus, and more specifically against two students of EHU who were recognized as political prisoners, Marfa Repkova and Akihiru Gaevsky. Your Excellency, I want to express gratitude for your interest in the mission of our university and for supporting the democratic future of Belarus. It is with great pleasure that the community of EHU welcomes you today. I am looking forward to your keynote address today and believe that today's occasion will strengthen ties between EHU and Estonia. Thank you.
I'm very happy to talk to students from Belarus. Once upon a time there was a train which ran from Tallinn to Minsk. It was called Chaika. That was during the Soviet Union time. And I was always very sad that when I took this train I always got out in Tartu, in our university town, and I never traveled to Minsk. But I had an opportunity at the turn of the century, and it was before the elections, as well you have been for many years, even if the same person has always been elected. But there was Belarusian opposition nevertheless, and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung from Germany was organizing lectures for Belarusian opposition, and I was invited to talk about the free market reforms in Estonia. I was advising Estonian Prime Minister Mart Laar at that time, and indeed I visited Belarus, and I know therefore that there has been a vivid opposition, not concentrated into one or few organizations, quite diffuse movement, but it has always been there. And the level of oppression even then was such that I remember thinking that I've never looked from outsider's viewpoint at the Soviet Union, even if I grew up in Soviet Union, occupied Estonia. And I realized suddenly how my own relatives, when during the Soviet time they visited Estonia, must have felt. I also earned a restriction to visit Belarus thereafter for 10 years for having rolled up an economist in my handbag, because you had to list all the books and journals you were bringing to the Belarus. And the problem was I simply forgot that I have one rolled up in a handbag which I was reading. So for 10 years I couldn't revisit your country. I haven't checked whether I now come or I cannot. It's 20 years gone, so maybe I can. So I am one of those leaders of European nation who deeply knows what is going on. And I've been really worried that there aren't very many of us, there are the Baltics and the Poles, who do spread this information about what is happening on Belarus and what is the objective of Belarusian people movement right now. Because many people, when the developments in Belarus in the summer were starting to unroll, they said, oh my God, yet another Ukraine. And we were, no. This is not another Ukraine. Belarusian people are demonstrating for upholding the Helsinki Final Acts. Russia is part of signatories of Helsinki Final Acts because Soviet Union signed and they heritage. So they have to respect Helsinki Final Acts. Of course, for us it is no surprise they aren't, because they are not recognizing Helsinki Final Acts vis-à-vis Georgia, Ukraine, so on and so on. So we are still very much explaining daily what is going on. And we try to support civil society in Belarus. And this is why we are also supporting this establishment and will continue to do so. We do it in a way that we do not interfere in the internal politics of Belarus. We don't want to do that. So if you hear, and you hear this narrative very often, which comes from Russia, which says Baltic states and Europe in general try to expand the sphere of influence of Europe into Belarus. And we always say, sorry, this is the Russian way of thinking. Russia talks spheres of influence. We speak international rule of law, Helsinki Final Acts, and we don't talk about, having more influence or less influence in Belarus. Belarusian people have the right to decide for themselves. You may choose next dictator, you may choose somebody who turns you towards West, you may choose somebody who keeps you closely related to Eurasian Union. All this is your choice. We don't mind which way you go, but we want you to have this choice. And the narrative is Russian Stratcom, and we try to kill it as much as possible. I told you that I was 20 years ago telling your opposition about economic reform, and at that time I was relatively young, about 30, and I honestly believe that, economic reform is where you need to start changing the country. I've learned a lot since, and now I know that no, it's the rule of law, not only in economic sphere, but independent institutions, free media, right to speak out your thoughts, all this comes first. Because whatever you do as an economic reform, you cannot be successful otherwise. Even the most successful communist economy, the Chinese economy, has a glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling is pretty high. Because as long as you are a low-income country or a middle-income country, you can keep, developing your economy by using, known technology which comes to your country because your workforce is educated but cheap, and you will rise the salaries and your economy will grow. But there is a ceiling, and the ceiling is somewhere between becoming from the middle-income country to the rich country. Why? Because to be a rich country, you need creativity of people, and only free people are truly creative. And that's why, for example, China, in my mind, should never join the OECD, because it cannot be sustainably in long term successful in its economic development, because its people are not free. So whatever is told by any dictator or authoritarian regime to anybody, only free rule of law countries can also be economically successful. It's not alternatives, it's the same process, and it's absolutely necessary to develop that. And I am sure you all learn it here in Vilnius, and you more or less know it. And we've seen that, trusting to fundamental rights and respect of the separation of the institutions and independence of institutions have always carried us through, even in the difficult times. Because democratic nations also have elections, and elections have sometimes results which bring into power politicians who are not as respectful for let's say, gay rights, female rights, I mean, basically the media freedom and so on. And at these points in history, you need your institutions to be so strong that they stand up to the kowtowing of the politicians. Yes, politicians will pester civil servants, they will fire some, prosecutors will not be able to, I mean, run for the second mandates, they just fall in this fight, but they, institutions, stand through this until the next elections. This makes sure that, I mean, the public opinion can, if it wants to, adjust itself again and recognize that indeed this Western way of thinking of rule of law is the way we want to go. Of course, there will probably be in the history countries which will democratize and then thereafter fall back a little bit and not be as democratic as we wish. And this is the right for people to decide then to go this way as well. It's very hard to claw back thereafter. But I mean, people also have the right to make wrong choices and wrong directions for their nation. This is democracy. Sometimes it gives us the results which, looking from the outside, you might say it was maybe not the best, but it's the right for people to decide freely. This is extremely, extremely important. So, my advice and hope for Belarus is that prepare for the reforms already now. Inform yourself really well about what does it mean, the separation of the institutions, how to make sure that your economy does not become corrupt, because, you know, poor economies are really easy to buy up by those who have close links to the government. They might be national, they might be international, it doesn't matter. If they come to grab big proportion of your economy in this system where you are not democratic, then your economy again will not be able to develop. For the simple reason that these assets, which are in this way in the hands of the oligarchs, I mean, these assets are not liquid. So they are valueless, basically, for the outsiders. They cannot be valued and therefore they cannot be sold and therefore additional development again cannot happen. So if you allow big chunks of your economy to fall into the hands of a few oligarchs, they will run the technology they already have to the end, use the market relations which they already had. They will not be looking for new technology and new markets because they cannot get investment, because, I mean, their assets cannot be valued because we don't know the true value of the assets, because it always depends on how close you are to the government. We have countries who have troubles with that. I think Ukraine is, it's no secret that Ukraine has these kind of problems. It cannot get out of the trap of oligarchy. So when you become free and you start establishing independent institutions, you have to also make sure that you immediately, if you go, for example, for privatization, that it is done in a way that oligarchs will not be born in your economy. It's extremely important to keep your economy free and possibilities for all business people to achieve success and to fail at the same level without political influence coming into the game. It's also very important that this message is known to your own people and to the foreign capital. And when you get to the next steps, you have rule of law, you have economic environment which is inviting for foreign capital, they feel secure to invest. Then there will be a next challenge. Foreign capital comes and says, we want special treatment. Fair enough, they were used, many countries actually, also in Eastern Europe, gave special treatment to foreign capital. But the trouble with foreign capital getting special treatment is that, I mean, then they invest into your country according to these special rules and take them into account, and as soon as you want to harmonize the rules for everybody, then they will leave. And in addition, you create unequal situation for your own people creativity and need to invest if you give special treatment for big foreign capital. Many in Eastern Europe did this era. I remember very often we were asked, and you know, at the turn of the century, all Eastern European countries were fighting for foreign investment, let's say, to build car factories in Eastern European countries. And they came and asked for this special treatment, and I as an advisor to Prime Minister said, no, we treat everybody very well, we have flat tax rates. Later we also added a system where retained earnings are not taxed at all. perfect climate for capital investment. We still have it, by the way, we haven't been able to change it, even if capital investment is not primary in a startup economy, what Estonia is, but you know, policy is like it is. Sometimes you get really fall in love with your own system, don't change it. But foreign capital, local capital is all treated the same. Nobody is treated differently in Estonia, you don't get any advantages. Result, no car factories in Estonia. Result, Estonian average salary today is about 1,400 euros. In our competitors at that time who got the car factories, in car factory you cannot pay more than 600 or 700 euros. Now they are very much fighting with public supports to keep this yesterday running. We didn't have this yesterday. Instead we have a startup economy because nobody wanted to build car factories in Estonia. And these are little steps, by which you always need to analyze what will be best for the long term, for the development of the nation, while you are still taking these first steps of getting this freedom to choose for yourself. I don't want to speak very long because I want us to have an interactive discussion rather than to have a lecture here in front of you, because then I know I'm really telling you what you are interested to hear. But I would really advise you to look at the Eastern European transformation processes and ask different nations why they did things how they did and how they estimate this turned out. Indeed, sometimes they had long-term benefits, sometimes they had shorter-term benefits. It differs. Our reform experience very much differs. We have experimented a lot. And all this is kind of a pool of information for you to look into and to analyze and to follow or decide not to follow. And the final word of warning, whatever way you go, when you become free, it will not be free in this sense that Russia will punish you. Gas prices in Estonia, when we broke out from the Soviet Union, went far higher than in Germany. They are still higher than in Germany, only now they are a little bit lower because there is the liquid gas terminal in Lithuania, so Russian gas price immediately fell below that level. It cannot sell, but at least it keeps prices low. So gas prices will skyrocket. All the trade relations will be, Russia will operate trade restrictions and so on, which means that before it gets better economically, it definitely will get worse. And this is my biggest worry for Belarusian people. I don't know whether they recognize it, whether they understand it, that there is price for freedom. And the price is the loss of economic well-being, probably up to 20-30% of the GDP per capita. Definitely not less. And I think we should be very open and honest about this. And then, of course, as you build your country, your rule of law, your economic space, investment starts to come into your country and it will turn your economy around as well, which means that, you will find new partners, new markets where to sell, and gradually Russia will basically lose its grip over your economy, and then they are ready to trade with you again, because anyway it doesn't matter, you are not lost without them anyway. How all this in the future will shape up, it's for you to decide, and as I said, we support you all the way on the road to democratic development, as we are supporting Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, Azerbaijan, but it's a tough love. We always demand that, we can only support you if you are aspiring to become democracies. You are free not to become democracies, but then we are sorry, our expertise is not there for you, because we don't want to make autocratic regimes stronger. For example, Estonia being the digitally developed nation, if I helped to create e-government system in an autocratic nation, I would have made autocratic regime much stronger and much more effective to oppress its people. We don't do it. So, choice is yours. I hope you choose democracy and freedom. I know you want to choose democracy and freedom, and we are with you all the way, and I'm ready to discuss with you on whatever subject matter. I touched upon a few things you can bring into the discussion, totally different subject matters as well. Thank you for listening.